places. As countries start to improve their economies, have expanded middle classes, disposable income, what do? They indulge. They indulge in diets. They consume fewer cereals and tubers and more fats and sugars. And this has led to an increase in obesity in populations over the last few decades. Places like Mauritius, not a place that you would think is a world leader in increase in obesities, but it is, because they're becoming more westernized in their diet. And this is linked to things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, respiratory illnesses, sleep disorders, and even depression. We also live in a much cleaner world, which is a good thing. We understand the relationship between sanitation and health, which we didn't get, we didn't understand in the early days of agriculture and the Neolithic Revolution, but we now keep ourselves very clean, washing our hands for 20 seconds or more. But of course, this leads to a hyper clean environment that we've seen an increase in things like allergies and hypersensitive immune systems in the past few years, which there is a hypothesis, it's called the hygiene hypothesis, which suggests that exposure to germs, especially at a young age, may help immune development. That is to say, as you're developing, your body is developing, your immune system is trying to identify friend and foe. And if you're never exposed to any foes, you won't have a very well-developed immune system. So in other words, a kid getting in there and playing around in the dirt may actually help to strengthen immune systems. Now, I don't want to recommend that you don't wash your hands, especially in the case of social distancing and that sort of thing, and trying to keep ourselves uninfected from diseases. But at the same time, we also have to think about longer term trends, and that maybe exposure to certain germs in a young age could build more robust immune systems, and maybe not have as strong of a reaction to inflammatory diseases and later infections. Also, things like asthma and other types of allergies may be compounded by the pollution that we're pumping into the air, particulates. Here in Las Vegas, we live in a very dusty environment. Part of that is natural. Part of it is because we're doing a lot of construction and mining, and the wind blows all of our that around. That can also exacerbate respiratory immune responses and things like that. But the world is also evolving around us. So try as we may to resist some of these pushes of things that are going to kill us. We tried to tackle malaria in the past century, and we did a really good job at killing mosquitoes that carry malaria with a product called DDT. And DDT was super effective at killing mosquitoes to begin with, but now almost all of them are resistant or immune to DDT. So it was, for about 50 years, we did really well, and we pumped this chemical in which doesn't biodegrade, and it actually made the shells of birds much weaker and thinner, which meant that bird species were dying out because of our use of DDT. So when we try and fix things, we actually compound the problem by having a knock-on effect for other the ecosystem. So while I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't try and protect ourselves, we also have to think multidimensional chess in this case, that when you kill mosquitoes, with a toxic chemical, it's going to have an effect outside of just the mosquitoes. And when you deplete mosquitoes, you're taking away food for other animal species that may have problems in unforeseen ways. Also, things like you want to keep a hospital clean, right? So you use antibiotics. Antibiotics kill bacteria. But bacteria reproduce many, many times a second, and they're constantly reproducing, which means they're constantly evolving. So one of them eventually is going to have a mutation that will be resistant to whatever antibiotics we're using on them, and then those are the ones that survive, and you then have those evolving into drug-resistant bacteria. And then you have a hospital full of unkillable bacteria. Isn't that terrible? Yes. So we've got to think broadly about the way that we try and deal with our health and survival into the future. And we also need to think that we are changing too. We're not just trying to resist change. We are going to be changing. I mentioned this early on in this course that I have a mutation, that I have one fewer set of teeth than most other people too because of a random mutation. That means my teeth fit into my face better because we're using our faces differently than we were 10,000 years ago. If it weren't for dentists, I would be the survivor. This would be, the new configuration would be fewer teeth in our mouths because we actually have smaller faces. So we're adapting. And all of these problems that we face are going to affect our future and our biology. So HIV, for instance, it was a terrible disease that has affected many, many people, but it's now appearing as though some people are merging with HIV resistance. That's terrific. We can use that to help some people, but it also means that our bodies intergenerationally are starting to have mutations that impart resistance to things like HIV, to smallpox, even things like the plague. Rather than evolution stopping right now with all of these, our artificial selection, because we're making choices that have almost immediate effects on our environment, human evolution may actually be accelerating. And so what can we expect in the future? Well, if we move to other planets, we're going to have different factors that are at work. We may have different gravity that acts upon our bodies, different exposure to the sun. So it's hard to think what might be in the future, but if we isolate particular elements, we might be able to speculate about those things. And you now have the tools as a physical anthropologist, with that in your mind now, to be able to think about those relationships. And I want to leave you with this final thought, that none of this is inevitable. All of these bleak things that I've been talking about doom and gloom, climate change, pandemics, all of these sorts of things can be altered by the decisions that we made. Some of them, many of them, are the consequences of the decisions we've made, which means that we can change course whenever we like. We're not going to stop evolving, but we can alter the way that we behave in the face of continuing evolution. Thanks very much.